One of the things I've always loved about Dungeons and Dragons is the fact that there are lots of different worlds within the D&D umbrella, whether it's Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, Mystara, so on and so forth. Now, I'm primarily familiar with the Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms settings, but there are a lot of additional settings that were either original settings that were created for a specific version of Dungeons and Dragons or settings that have been licensed for use within Dungeons and Dragons. But in the course of the conversation around the OGL that's been going on for the past few weeks and all this chaos with Wizards of the Coast and everything else, someone left a comment on one of my videos. I wish I would have written down who it was. I'd go through thousands of comments every single week, and it's sometimes hard to remember who said what, and sometimes I forget to mark this down. But here's what they had to say. They said, one of the issues with Wizards of the Coasts and their handling of Dungeons and Dragons and the various settings is that they tried to be too broad without a clear distinction between the settings other than the rule set that they're written for. And I kind of looked at that and went, oh, that's actually a very succinct way of talking about the greater problem, which is the fact that we have all of these settings, and whenever somebody mentions D&D, they have a setting that for them is the ultimate Dungeons and Dragons setting. For them, that is the Dungeons and Dragons setting. And that is an issue when you start talking about the greater body of work that is Dungeons and Dragons, because there's a lot more than just one setting. But this has also contributed to the conversation of, as much as they have like the greatest market share, or they have had the greatest market share for many, many years. And if you ever talk to a stranger, I think it's something someone said like, 85% is the market share, right? Is what has been mentioned in the public many times. So that means that out of every 10 people you talk to in the world, if you mention tabletop, they're not going to know what you mean unless you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, or when you say tabletop, they're immediately going to assume Dungeons and Dragons because of all of the settings that have been within the Dungeons and Dragons rule sets. Now, this is an interesting thing to me because one of the things I've pushed back hard on in the conversations over the last month have been people who come in and try to claim that Dungeons and Dragons is shit. Dungeons and Dragons sucks. And I never know whether these people are talking about a specific rule set within Dungeons and Dragons, because we've had many, or are they talking about a specific setting within Dungeons and Dragons, because we've had many? And this is part of the problem with this conversation, is because no one is being distinct about the things they say they don't like about Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's, again, a specific setting or, again, a specific rule set. Now, I've played multiple rule sets. I played first edition, second edition, the revised second edition AD&D. I never played third or 3.5 other than briefly 3.5, and of course video games set within the 3.5 setting. I skipped fourth edition entirely, and then I got back into DMing in 5th edition, because when we were building our World of the Weave and the Void, which is that world map behind me, it was going to be a legal nightmare for me to try to publish my hybrid homebrew system. If I wanted to reach the maximum amount of people, it was going to be much easier to just use the 5th edition and the OGL, which is what we chose to do at the time. So let's dive into this a little bit, because there are actually, as much as I love D&D and as much as I've been a D&D fanboy for many, many years, fanboy is probably not the correct word, because if I was a fanboy, I would know all this stuff. As much as I've enjoyed Dungeons and Dragons, my enjoyment has mostly related to two settings in particular, which is Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms. Outside of that, the rules, the rule sets that I've enjoyed the most have been first edition and that second edition revised AD&D. I like fifth, but AD&D is where my heart is. That's second edition. And when you start looking at all of the other stuff, my eyes were opened when I pulled up this wiki. And yes, I'm using the wiki. Sue me. Someone had said, "Oh, what about this setting, that setting, this setting?" And I went, "Okay, I've heard of those settings, but let me go research that." And when I pulled this up, I went, "Holy crap! I didn't realize how many settings there were." And when I sat down and talked with Liam for Liam's live stream the other day to talk about Dragonlance versus Forgotten Realms. He had mentioned a couple that I didn't even know about. So that was what sparked me in between the YouTube comment and Liam's comments. I went, let's make a video about this because I think it's a really interesting topic. And some people out there, like me, might not know what's going on with D&D or how this has contributed to the current conversation. I need a drink of coffee. It's early. Give me a second here. So let's take a look at the timeline here, shall we? So Blackmoor was the original campaign created by Dave Arneson. Said he created this for use in his personal games with chainmail rules back in 1971, prior to Greyhawk and prior to Dungeons and Dragons itself. The D&D supplement, Blackmoor supplement, was published in 1975. So here we have Blackmoor listed in 1977 as the year of release, and then that was carried through all the way until 1980 when Greyhawk. So we're going to be going off of the timeline here on the right. You'll see there are a lot of settings here, but they have other stuff set in here on the left where they've got the paragraph breaks down, which don't necessarily fit into the timeline here on the right perfectly. So I'm kind of gonna we're gonna go through this here. It says Birthright was a setting in which players took the powers of divinely empowered rulers of a nation. Okay, I don't know anything about that one. Blackmoor, we just covered. Conan and Red Sonja, it says in 1984. Well, why are they skipping to that in the timeline when we have Greyhawk? So let's just go straight to Greyhawk next. Dun, 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 dun. Where did it go? Why is it listed different? Oh, they're going alphabetical over here. Okay, so let's just there's an easier way to do this. So Greyhawk was the setting. Let's just open this up in another window here. Greyhawk was 1980, and that was the first. Let's see here. So it's a fictional world designed as a campaign setting for D&D. Although not the first campaign world, the world of Greyhawk closely identified with early development of the game beginning in 1972, and after being published, it remained associated with Dungeons & Dragons publications until 2008. The world itself started as a simple dungeon under castle designed by Gary Gygax, so they went from there. So I'm familiar with Greyhawk. Blackmoor I remember hearing about over the years, but I don't really know. Greyhawk, I know I've seen books and things of that nature, and I'm pretty sure. Hang on a second. Where is? I want to say that one of the first edition campaigns that I played used the Greyhawk setting. I'm pretty sure, but it was so many years ago that I really um, I don't remember. Had some Greyhawk Adventures published by TSR over the years. Very interesting, very interesting. Then we get into Mystara, which was 1981, it says. So let's open that up. It says Mystara, a campaign setting for D&D. It was the default setting for the basic version of the game through the 80s and 90s. Really? Okay. Most adventures published for the basic edition take place in the known world. Okay. The Mystara planet has subsettings. Blackmoor was retconned to exist in Mystara's distant past. The Hollow World first to enter surface. Oh, then there's the Savage Coast. Ooh. So I don't even know that I ever played. Like, I don't remember anything about Mystara. Ravenloft, I'm familiar with, but Ravenloft was 1983. We can go open that up real quick. Dun, 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 dun. Alternate time-space existent known as a pocket dimension or demi-plane called the demi-plane of dread. I never played any Ravenloft. It was designed by Tracy and Laura Hickman. Tracy and Laura Hickman also being the people who designed, you guessed it, Dragonlance, which came in 1984. This was the world that sucked me in. I personally, if you've watched the episode with Liam and I when we talk about Dragonlance versus Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance is that's my jam. I love Dragonlance more than any other setting in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's one of those weird places where I just love the novels so much. Even though there's been more video games from Forgotten Realms that I've enjoyed, Dragonlance has more novels that I've enjoyed, and I just love the setting more because it has the cataclysm and gods that have abandoned the people, and there's a lot of fun stuff that happens in the Dragonlance setting. By the way, if you want to know more about that, I'll try to remember where am I at here in this video. 10 minutes in. I'll try to remember to stick the link to the conversation that Liam and I had. If I don't stick it up here, I'll stick it down there in the description. So if you don't see something pop up here because I forgot to edit it in, just check the link below because I will put it in there. But we had a great conversation about that the other day. Really good. Sat down for about an hour and talked about Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms. All right, beginning beyond Dragonlance, we then get into Conan, which was a licensed adventure module, excuse me. Lankmar. It says it was an accessory for D&D, first published in 1985. I don't know anything. I've never heard of this one. So Lankmar and Kara Tour, I've never heard of these ever. Literally, I never heard of these until I opened up this the other day to do some R&D. It's a 2-book set, and then we have Abir Toril, a fictional planet that makes up. Oh, hang on. Where did it skip to that? Kara Tour. When I clicked on Kara Tour, it took me here to this is the Forgotten Realms setting. Huh. So I wonder why it took me to there. But anyway, because that says 1986, and then we get into Forgotten Realms in 1987. So let me skip around here a little bit. Red Sonja was another licensed one in 1986. So why is this listed? Fictional planet. Okay, Toril is originally the name of Jeff Grubb's personal campaign world before part of it was merged with Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms setting. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And then we get into Forgotten Realms, which is arguably the most famous of the settings, and I believe it became the de facto original. Let me see if it's mentioned here. Pretty sure it became the official setting of D&D with 5th edition, right? It's definitely one, and all, like most of the video games that I've played over the years have been in Forgotten Realms. 1990, 1999, 20, first edition. 2000. I'm skimming through this here because I want to find the part where they talk about when it became officially the number one setting. Yep. When D&D 5th edition was published in 2014, Wizards of the Coast announced that Forgotten Realms would continue to serve as the official campaign setting for its upcoming published adventure materials. So I think it pretty much started back in 2008 was when they really started to move towards not 2008, sorry, because 2008 had the other official setting, but sometime after that they transitioned to 5th edition, becoming the official one. Because I think somewhere in here, and we'll get to it in a little bit, there was the 4th edition setting that Liam mentioned, which I had never heard of before either. And it's somewhere in this list, so we'll get to it here in a minute. So after Forgotten Realms was released, we had Spelljammer, which is their space one. I've never played Spelljammer. I've heard of it, never played it. Hollow World, never. I mean, it was a subset. Yeah, it was a subset of Mystara. Okay. Then we have Dark Sun. I'm familiar with Dark Sun, but never played it. Al Qadim. Never heard of that either. Is that part of the... Is this... Okay. It uses 1001 Nights as a theme and is set in the land of Zakara called the Land of Fate. Never even heard of it. Never heard of it. Thunder Rift, which doesn't even have an entry. Birthright, never heard of it. Council of the Worms, never heard of it. Planescape, yes, I've heard of it. I played Planescape Torment back in the day. Red Steel, doesn't have a link, never heard of it. Arcane Age, Savage Coast, okay. Jackandor, like this, never heard of it. Okay, that's just going to take me to the same link. Rokugan? Fictional setting. What is this one? Legend of the Five Rings? First published as a joint venture between Aldrich Entertainment and Isomedia in 1995. It's feudal Japan with influences from other Eastern Asian cultures. Okay, never heard of it. Then we get into gotta lose my place. Dragon Fist. Never heard of that one either. Diablo 2 licensed. Mahasharpa. That just takes me back to that one. I mean, we could scroll down and find some more of these, but I'm just going through the list right now on the right here. Then we get into Ghost Walk. I've never heard of that. Introduced a campaign setting for the 3rd edition, similar to Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance. Unlike most other D&D settings, Ghost Walk was designed to be released as a single book, which would contain all the material for the world. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it at all. Eberron. This one I've heard of. Um, the World of Eberron. I've never played in it. Says it was chosen as the winner among 11,000 submissions to Wizards of the Coast in 2002 in their fantasy setting search. Won $100,000 for his contest submission. I'd want more than $100,000, but that's all right. This is the one that Liam mentioned. I had no idea because I never played 4th edition. Nenter Vale. Oh, they're just gonna make me scroll down for this one. Let's find it real quick. Oops, I went too far. Where is it? Nintervale is the sample community provided as the default setting in the 4th edition. Most source books refer to the cosmology this community exists in as simply the D&D world. Towns and other civilizations are described as points of light in an otherwise dark age, with the DM encouraged by the guidebook to leave the rest of the world largely unplanned, vague, and unpredictable. The deities presented in the 4th edition D&D guide are a combination of Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, and newly created gods. Portions of 2 continents were mapped in 2011. So that was the setting for 4th edition, right? Nenter Vale. I had never heard of it until Liam mentioned it, because again, I never played um, that rule set. Ravenka says it's a Magic the Gathering section. Exandria. Isn't that the world that hang on. Isn't Exandria the world that Critical Role uses? Yes. That's Matthew Mercer's world. Is it? That's licensed, right? Dun, 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 dun. High fantasy setting. I don't know how they've licensed that. That's interesting. Then we get into Theros. What is Theros? There's nothing listed for Theros, so it's going to be a scroll down thing. Let's see here. Hang on, I'm hearing all sorts. If you guys hear music, not music, if you hear a loud noise in the background, there's something going on in the kitchen with cats. Chris is yelling at somebody. Theros is a setting inspired by Greek mythology and Roman mythology, originating as a part of the Magic the Gathering block. It was released in 5th edition settings as a book called The Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Very interesting. Then we get into Strixhaven, which was a 5th edition, and Radiant Citadel. Where's Strixhaven down here? Plane of Arcavios and its Magic University Strixhaven were created from scratch by the world building team for the 2021 School of Mages Magic the Gathering set. Okay. And then it said, what was the other one? It was with an R, right? I forget now. I'm going to go scroll back up to it. It said Radiant Citadel. Where's that one listed here? Radiant Citadel, located in the ethereal plane, founded by refugees from 27 separate worlds, connected to those 15 other worlds as a hub. Introduced in the journeys through Radiant Citadel, is intended as a fantasy melting pot city, and short adventures would take place in a different one of the connected worlds. The point I wanted to make, as we talked about in the opening of this video, because now we're like 20 minutes in, as you can see, there have been a ton of settings that have been published under the Dungeons and Dragons umbrella, on top of which there have been multiple editions of Dungeons and Dragons published over the years, which it's a melting pot of things, which is why Dungeons and Dragons is many different things to many different people. And I think it's important when we're having conversations about Dungeons and Dragons. I see so many people talking about we got to burn it all down to the ground. We need to just Dungeons and Dragons sucks anyway. Get rid of it. We need to go all let's enjoy it. Let's do these other systems. Great. Let's play other systems. Let's play other settings. I get that. I support that. I'm a huge fan of that. But you shouldn't just want to burn all this down. We have, how many years, how many decades of enjoyment and thousands of different ideas that have been put forth, but you have all of these published worlds that have been campaigns for who knows how many players, and all these different rule sets. It's really hard to separate what is Dungeons and Dragons because it means so many different things to different people. When I think Dungeons and Dragons was for me the de facto tabletop game for me. When I wanted to sit down and play tabletop with my friends, I didn't say let's go play tabletop. I would say let's go play some D&D. And we would pull out our D&D player's handbook and our D&D game master guide and our D&D monster manual, and we would either play an official setting or we would make up our own world. The very first project that I ever embarked on um, in my own world was in 1999 when I created the world of the Saga of Leucemia. I then made that into a play-by-post world. My very first ever published short story was set in the capital city of Fingless Mirror back in 2008, and then I wrote the novels, and then that became an MMORPG, and then that spun off and became, other things, and then we've moved on, and now we're working on the World of the Weave and the Void, which was designed as a setting first. It was designed as a homebrew setting, but then we modded it into 5th edition for the OGL, and then we pulled the OGL out, and now it's system agnostic. But for many, 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 many years, literally probably until about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I literally referred to all my tabletop gaming as D&D. Like, I'm going to go play D&D. Let's play some D&D on Friday night. Like, that was just it because D&D is so many things. It's not just one rule set. It's not just one setting. It's all these different things. And for me and my friends and my family, D&D has always been that go-to. And a lot of people will say, well, that's the best part about the OGL fiasco is it's opened your eyes to all these other worlds. You're not incorrect, but it's also a very, in my opinion, naive viewpoint to want to say, burn all of this down. Burn it all down because D&D sucks. Well, what part of D&D sucks? There are so many rule sets. There are so many settings. What aspect of D&D are you talking about? And that gets back to the problem that was originally discussed in that comment that someone left on one of my YouTube videos, which is, part of the issue with Wizards of the Coast is that they've put so much under the Dungeons and Dragons umbrella, rule sets and settings, that it has made it impossible to really know what is Dungeons and Dragons because it's going to depend on who you talk to. Are you talking to a 5th edition player? Well, they're probably going to think Forgotten Realms. But are you talking to a 2nd edition player? They might think something different. Are you talking to a 1st edition player? They're going to think something different. And within each one of those rule sets, you have additional breakdown of saying, well, which setting under this rule set are you referring to? Because 1st edition had multiple rule sets, 2nd edition had multiple rule sets, 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, multiple settings, not rule sets, multiple settings under each one of these rule sets. It's complicated. More complicated than even I knew, because as much as I love D&D, as much as enjoyment as I've gotten out of it over the years, I've primarily used Dungeons and Dragons as a rule set to create homebrew worlds and play in. I've played a lot of Dragonlance stuff. I've read a lot of Dragonlance books. I've read a lot of Forgotten Realms books. I've played a lot of Forgotten Realms games. But when it comes to the tabletop component, the vast majority of my time in Dungeons and Dragons has been doing homebrew using the source books. In terms of novels, it's been Dragonlance Forgotten Realms, and in terms of video games, it's been Forgotten Realms. It's crazy. I don't know. This is kind of a rambling video now that I'm towards the end of this because I don't do anything on a script and I just blah, 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 blah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop them down there below. If you want to have a greater conversation about this, every Sunday at 8 a.m. Central, I do This Week in Tabletop, This Week in TTRPGs, at 8 a.m. Central on the channel. So tune into one of those live streams and we talk about crazy stuff like this and all the stuff that happened in the week with Tabletop. And if you like what you see here today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Support in all the ways listed down below. Super easy. Your best options are memberships here on the channel or a membership over at our Patreon page where you also get a copy of our source book, the first adventure module, all the map packs that we've created, the fantasy novel that's set in that world, and there's a point-and-click adventure game that you can get a demo for right now, and that's coming out later this year. So check all that stuff out. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the topic of the day, what you think is your favorite setting, your favorite rule set, and beyond. And until next time, everybody, stay safe. Happy gaming.